Okay, so welcome everyone to our last session of our two-day Texas AEL Instruction Virtual Conference. My name is Anne Marie Molinari Sanders, and our presenter today is Denise Guckert. And I'm going to share a little bit more about Denise later, but she is very much known for her expertise in distance learning. And this session today is wonderful because it's best practices for hybrid distance learning. And I want to just provide a framework for a minute and share with you that we're not talking about virtual learning. We're going to be talking about strategies, practices you can use for those students that will return to the brick and mortar classroom and are also working on the distance learning curriculum, okay? So I wanna make sure we frame that correctly before we start. And I would like to introduce to you a wonderful colleague. This is Denise Guckert, and she is a retired adult education and literacy director and a contract trainer for Train PD. And I want to just share something with all of you before I introduce her bio. It's been 10 years since I moved to Texas, and I was from California, and I was nervous and scared when I took over a position for the statewide distance learning manager for the former state office of Texas Learns. And this amazing lady took me under her wing. She made me feel comfortable, and she taught me everything she knew about distance learning. And I will forever be grateful to her, because to say I was a little scared is an understatement. And she's been amazing. So Denise has been involved in adult education for almost 25 years, serving as an instructor, technology specialist, program coordinator, and professional development specialist, as well as director. Her areas of expertise include educational technology, adult learning theory, ESL, and transitions to college and career. She earned her master's degree from the University of Texas at Austin Foreign Language Education Center, and is certified to teach secondary English, Spanish, and ESL in Texas. Currently, Ms. Guckert is a doctoral student at Texas State University in developmental education with a focus on learner support. And just
Thank you for that incredible introduction, Anne-Marie. We're so glad Anne-Marie stayed in Texas, okay?
Well, thank you. All right, awesome. Here we go.
Okay, well, hello everyone. I'm so glad you're here today after so many sessions of a lot of you of going online for virtual training. We're going to talk first. We're going to make sure that you know that there are resources after this webinar. I've been on plenty and I want to know where to get the information afterwards. After that, I'll briefly get to know you. I'll find out what your role is and what kind of DL curriculum you're using right now. Then we'll talk about what do we mean by hybrid distance learning. We really struggled to come up with a word that really was specific to what we wanted to talk about today. We're going to talk about meeting our needs, our students' needs, and we have to meet them in the traditional classroom, but we also need to meet them online when they're distant. Best practices for hybrid distance learning, we'll go over those, and we'll do a review and wrap up at the end. Okay, on our learning objectives, basically, I want you to be able to define what I'm talking about when I say hybrid instruction, hybrid learning, as we use it in Texas adult education. I want you to be able to identify what your role is in DL. And you may be here today without a specific role in DL, like let's say you're a program director. Well, you're in charge of people that are doing DL, right? Also, the DL curriculum that's used. You really, even if you're a traditional classroom teacher, you should know what your students are using, even if you're not familiar with it. We're going to brainstorm how you can meet how you're already meeting your students' needs online. Identify best practices for hybrid distance learning instruction. That's our meat of our training today. And then I want you to self-reflect. As we go through, I'll be asking you questions about each best practice for you to reflect on what you are doing now and what you might be able to do in the future as you continue with your distance learning program in your programs. What we're not going to talk about today, and this is right now, a lot of you are doing teaching in a very different way than you're used to. One of the things we're not going to talk about is integrating technology in a traditional classroom. I do a lot of training on that, and I love that, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're not talking about being in a traditional classroom and doing technology. We're not talking either about what you're doing right now. A lot of teachers right now that are traditional teachers, they usually teach in a brick and mortar classroom, but all of a sudden they're virtual because of COVID-19. We're not actually talking about best practices for teaching in that manner. Those are live sessions, and there's some of these practices that would transfer over to that, definitely, but these are slightly different formats. We're talking about distance learning, where the student is not live all of the time with the teacher. And then we're also not going to get into specific details about the distance learning policy from TWC. If you have questions about that, you always can talk to your program supervisors, and they can talk to TWC directly, to their program specialist there, but that's not something we'll talk about today.
If anybody needs the link to the distance learning page
Oh,
on
okay.
the Train PD website, it's a wonderful page that provides a lot of information about the distance learning policy, distance learning FAQ if you're interested.
Now today, I wanted to tell you, we're going to look at some links today, and we don't have time to really look at them in detail and talk about them. They're resources for you. So there's a session resource sheet that will be available in the PD portal. And it's going to be in a place, if you can see that little circle, the first circle there, it says Connect Communities. When you log in, you're going to go to Connect Communities, and what you'll be doing is you'll find the one that's called Adult Education and Literacy Instruction Community of Practice. And that is where the session resources will be posted. You might have to scroll down to find it. When you click on it, you will be asked to join, and that means you will get emails when people post in that list if you want. I believe Anne-Marie wanted to take a little time to bring that up for you. Is that true?
Well, we're going to do that at the end, but I do
Okay.
thank you so much, Denise, but I want to add one part to this. Once you join the community, and this is such a great example of where to find it, go to Connect Communities, find the community, join it, but then you're going to look for a folder that's titled 2020 Texas AEL Instruction Virtual Conference, okay? And then that's where we'll be posting Denise's resources. 2020 Texas AEL Instruction Virtual Conference.
And then you can find it. Thank you, because I didn't know that piece. I put this in because it says, please stay with me today. I'm the green arrow. I'm on the main highway, and you're going to see lots of little links to really kind of maybe cool stuff that you're interested. Don't enter those. Please stay on the Zoom today. The minute you go and copy and paste a link and go off site, I've done it myself during webinars, you might have problems catching up or getting back to what we're talking about. So just stay with us and wait to go to the session resources, and then take your time to go through those resources later. We have a poll coming up, so take your time to read through these. I only teach distance learning classes in teams. In other words, you're a DL teacher and you just teach people in teams that are in your DL classes. Maybe you do distance learning classes and you teach a brick and mortar traditional class. Maybe you are only a traditional classroom teacher, but you're interested in distance learning. Maybe you're a supervisor or a curriculum development person that works with DL. You may do other things. You may supervise other people, but you are in charge of some DL stuff. You may work with your distance learning in a support staff capacity. DL entry into teams, you might work with those. You might be a data management person, and you might have a different role. And we have a lot of people here that have a different role. What is your role? Are you a program coordinator? Are you a program director? What is your role? So what we see is very few people only teach distance learning classes in teams. And you know why? Unless you're in a very large program, you probably do other things as well. Now, a lot of people teach both distance learning and traditional classes, and that's kind of cool because, and especially if you have the same students, that becomes really cool, okay? A lot of you only teach traditional classes in teams, and that's really nice because part of this is today is to say, we have traditional classroom teachers all of a sudden who might be working with some students in distance learning curriculum. How can they help, even if they don't have access maybe to the curriculum? And we've got some support capacity and something else's. So we've got transitions instructors and coordinators. We have traditional some account management, very interesting. Adult ESL, that would probably be a traditional teacher, right? A traditional classroom. Somebody said they do distance, and lots of people in instruction. Okay, so most of our people here today probably are instructional, but we do have management administrative capacity too. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and move on now. Now, the next question I'm going to ask, so what DL curriculum does your program use? So I'm going to kind of be watching these. I just want an idea. I see a lot of Burlington, Essential Ed, Canvas. I actually have used Canvas. Burlington, USA Learns, Burlington, Essential, USA Learns, Burlington, Play-Doh, Burlington, Stand Out. I didn't know they had one. Stand Out. Okay, Burlington. I don't know all of the curriculums. We've had a lot added. English Discovery, that's at ACC, I bet. Stand Out, Burlington, Play-Doh. Lots of Burlington. We got a lot of Essential Ed. Aztec also does like a GED Academy that you're probably using. Burlington, Canvas, Burlington. Learning Upgrade, that's a digital literacy one. Edmentum is Plato. I'm just kind of going through these. Burlington, Canvas, Burlington, Edmonton Learning Upgrade, Stand Out. We've got some people using Stand Out. I'm not familiar with it. Someone who uses Stand Out, type in the chat box, is that Stand Out series? Is it from the textbook series that coordinates with their distance learning curriculum? Like, can you do it both in class and online, kind of like Burlington? That would be interesting if it did. That Stand Out is a textbook series that I've used before with ESL, so I'm assuming. Cambridge Ventures, okay, Ventures now has a one that also integrates Burlington, Cambridge, Burlington, Essential Ed. Okay, there's only a set of approved distance learning curriculum, and I have it here. It's on the Train PD website, and if you're involved in distance learning, we'll talk about that. You should have been taking a 3-hour course that talks about this curriculum. So if it's not on this list, it's not considered approved distance learning curriculum that can count for hours, where you count them as hours that students go through, okay? So I don't know if Stand Out, I don't remember Stand Out as being an approved distance learning curriculum, but Burlington is, and Cambridge just came out with Ventures 3 workbooks that goes along with their Ventures 3rd edition. Those are the only two I know that go with textbook series that I'm aware of. But we'll talk about that in a minute, because that helps if you're a traditional classroom teacher, you kind of know what's going on in their distance learning. Okay, well, I kind of have an idea. Oh, so Cengage has a USB that goes with it. Thank you, Yvonne. I really appreciate. So there is a USB component that seems like it goes with Stand Out, and that could be distance learning if it's approved curriculum. If it's not approved distance learning curriculum, you can always use it, but it will not count as hours for the students and teams.
It won't count as proxy hours.
Yeah,
and just to clarify, everybody, if you want to see what the current approved list of distance curriculum is, go to the Distance Learning Initiative page on the Train PD website, and you'll see everything that is approved. I just want to clarify that if it's not on the list, it can't count as proxy hours in teams, okay? Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Stand Out is not approved distance learning curriculum. You could use the USB, but it won't count for proxy hours. You always can use technology in your classrooms. That's fantastic. But today we're talking about how you use it to get proxy hours, because we want our students to get those proxy hours. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we kind of have an idea as a group what people are using. Kind of helps. Okay, so what am I talking about? What are we talking about? Anne-Marie went back and forth. We went back and forth. What are we going to call this? Hybrid instruction in Texas Adult ESL, AEL, Adult Education and Literacy. So what we're talking about is when you use teacher-led real-time instruction. It's synchronous. It's happening at the same time. You're interacting with the teacher. That's called direct teaching. Now, a lot of you are doing it virtually. You're doing it online, but it's still direct synchronous teaching. That's one kind of traditional instruction. The other one is when we use technology mediated asynchronous instruction. Asynchronous is the opposite of synchronous. Asynchronous is not at the same time. So you probably all have done that, where you've gotten logged onto something and you've had to answer questions and read other people's responses in a discussion board. It's not taking place at the same time. It's asynchronous. Distance learning, originally when it was set up, that's basically what distance learning is defined as in Texas. So I believe they are using, and Marie told me, mostly the term virtual right now, when you have your brick and mortar classes that suddenly have had to go online and do virtual stuff. That's great, but it's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about traditional instruction, which I assume some of you may, I think more programs will integrate these. I call them live online. That's from Austin Community College out there. Live online means it's something that happens online, but it's a live classroom. But the brick and mortar classrooms happen in brick and mortar in the buildings, but they're interactive and they're live. So those traditional instructions are human to human. They're led by a teacher or facilitated by a teacher, and they're synchronous. They happen at the same time. Now, you notice I didn't say it had to be brick and mortar. I just said it had to be human to human, teacher-led, and synchronous to be what we're going to say is traditional right now. Then the distance learning using approved DL curriculum is the other side for the hybrid learner. It's technology to human for the most part. It's going to be the distance learning curriculum and the learner, not the teacher. The teacher's usually not there. Independent of the teacher. And it's asynchronous. It's not taking place at the same time. So when we are talking today, we're talking traditional instructions, that one side. Human to human at the same time, and the teacher's there working with the students as they're there with them. Distance learning with approved DL curriculum. It has to be from the list. It has to be set up in teams. When you're using distance learning that's approved, your program should be setting that up in teams so you can have your students earn hours, and they are called proxy hours, though we're not going to go into all of the terms in the distance learning policy, okay? And that's technology to human. It's independent. There's no teacher there with the student. And it's asynchronous. It's on their own. And we as learners, we as teachers and learners, we do asynchronous and we do synchronous. So type right now, what would I consider what we're doing right now? Would this be traditional instruction or distance learning using approved DL curriculum? If it's traditional, just write a T. And if it's distance learning, you just have to write a D. So write a T or a D. What are we doing right now? You got it. We're doing traditional instruction. Human to human, live, teacher-led. Thank you, guys. Okay? So now we're going to go to the next slide. Now, I want to say, though, hybrid instruction can be very integrated. If you teach an integrated hybrid instruction, that means you're teaching you're blending very closely what happens in the traditional classroom with the distance learning curriculum. That is typically only possible with curriculum that are tied to a program or textbook that you're doing in the classroom. Cambridge has come out with one that I know of called their workbooks. It's called Cambridge Ventures 3 workbooks that is approved now, and it ties to what they're doing in the classroom with the books. So Burlington has been out for quite a while. They don't have books, but they have printed material to use in the classroom. They have things you can present on the screen to use on the classroom, and they have stuff online that the student does independently. These things are not the same, but they complement each other. So if you have an integrated curriculum like Burlington or Cambridge, it's a lot easier to do integrated hybrid instruction. However, most of the time, if you're using GED Academy, like the Essential Ed or the Aztec, a lot of people using that, or Plato, English Discoveries, it may not correlate exactly to what you're using in the traditional classroom. And we call that separated hybrid instruction. Sometimes it's the same teacher. Maybe I'm teaching a class, traditional class, my students are in English Discoveries, but I'm using Ventures in my classroom. And I don't try to tie it together. I say, look, they're learning this here, they're learning that there, they're learning English, and they're getting more hours, and they're getting better. and that's okay. It doesn't have to be integrated. Sometimes you just don't have the time to integrate all that. Or it can be different teachers. Many times, I know you have a multi-level classrooms. So let's say you have an ESL classroom that's multi-level, and you're using USA 1 and USA 2, for example. So USA 1 and USA 2, you have the teacher, all of your programs using that. So you have a DL teacher who's assigned to USA 1 and a DL teacher assigned to USA 2. But all the traditional instructors that are in the classrooms, their students are assigned to this curriculum. So who's helping the student? If the DL teacher is helping that student with their USA Learns, and we have the traditional classroom teacher that's just teaching the regular classroom materials using a different curriculum, then basically they're called separated hybrid instruction with different teachers. So you can have different models, okay? You have different models that you can use. I know it's a kind of, it gets sticky because we're doing that stuff right now where we're doing the online virtual, okay? So let's go to the next slide. Integrated hybrid instruction, usually the same teacher. You have a traditional classroom and an assigned distance learning curriculum. That assigned distance learning curriculum, in Teams, it can be entered assigned to the actual classroom, or it could be entered as a separate distance learning class. But all those are assigned, they're all tied to distance learning curriculum. And I already talked about a couple of publishers do things that integrate a lot easier. This is just a visual representation of the definitions I just gave you. Here we might have a lot of different teachers. I don't know if your program is like this or not. Where I used to coordinate at Austin ISD, our program, we were smaller. So we had 1 or 2 distance learning teachers. We didn't have a coordinator. I did everything, okay, for that. But we had all of the different teachers in the real-time traditional classrooms. Maybe you have 20 classrooms, maybe you have 150. And we had 2 distance learning teachers, and maybe you have 15, but they weren't the same teachers. So our students were supported by different teachers depending if they're in the real class, in the traditional classroom, or if they're in the distance learning program. So we had a separated hybrid instruction where we were teaching at that time.
Can you explain more about what you mean by facilitates the DL curriculum?
DL. Okay, well, basically what I mean by that is, okay, now if y'all know Glenda Rose, she's been doing distance learning forever in Texas as well. And the way, right now I'm not at a program, but I talked to her in length. She has her Teams person sets up people in Teams, the traditional classroom teacher, and assigns a distance learning curriculum to the classroom. That doesn't mean the students have to be in that classroom. That's just available to them if the teacher gives them the information. But at first, she didn't want the traditional teacher to work with those students because they didn't have the training and they didn't have any idea what was on the curriculum. So what she has is that she sets it up, for the most part, as a separate distance learning class in Teams. And she has a teacher who's very familiar with the curriculum serve those students. However, if they're already tied to that curriculum in that classroom, they don't necessarily need to be in the distance learning class, because the hours, this is going into where I don't really want to go into Teams, the hours can be input directly into that class. And that's a change that's taken place fairly recently in Teams. And there will be other training, I'm sure, on that, but that's kind of a Teams question. But what I'm meaning by this is the person who facilitates the DL instruction, I'm calling that person the DL teacher. Okay, now sometimes that teacher is the same teacher as is in the traditional classroom. Whether they have training in that curriculum and whether they have training in DL is the problem. A lot of times I think it's happening that all of a sudden they're being told, oh, your students are all using this curriculum, and they don't know anything about that curriculum. So if one of the points of this, a good practice, is that person who's a traditional classroom teacher, if that person's going to facilitate the DL curriculum assigned in Teams to that classroom, then that person needs to become a DL teacher and get familiar with the curriculum. Or the program needs to bring in another person who's familiar with that curriculum and have that person work with those students. So it is up to the program how to manage that, but it needs to happen. Somebody who knows the curriculum needs to be the teacher of those students for that curriculum or facilitate it. Does that help answer the question?
She
You can
says
chat.
yes.
It says
Awesome.
yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's a lot of ways this could look. Okay. So, okay. Now, in the next slide, I do think we needed to answer this before the next slide. I want to know in your program, what's more common right now? Do you not know? That's fine. I want you to type a 0 in the chat pod if you don't know. If it's integrated, you're using Burlington and your traditional classroom teacher uses Burlington in the classroom and Burlington on the DL. That's integrated. If they're using it both places, that's integrated. So if that's the case, type a 1. If it's separated, your teacher uses Burlington. You have Burlington as a curriculum in your program. This is what my program did. But all the teachers taught different. They were using Ventures textbooks for the most part. So Ventures. So they didn't tie the curriculums together. And so we had separated hybrid instruction. It's kind of important that you know what you're doing. It doesn't matter. You don't have to make it integrated. Sometimes it's very difficult and time consuming, but you need to know what you're doing, what the purpose is. So I need people to type a 0, a 1, or a 2 in the chat box. And it might be only distance learning teachers that know this answer. So if you are unsure, just type a 0 for me now. We got lots of 1s, 2s. And if you want to type a 0, that's fine. And if you don't know, that's fine. If you're a traditional classroom teacher, you might not know what's going on in your whole program. If you're from a big program, you might not have any idea. If you're a small program, you probably know. Okay? Thank you so much. So first of all, identify what are you doing in your program? You need to know. Okay? I want you to think about how you engage students offline. Think about it. What do you do to get students to keep coming to class? We've had lots of training on this in the last 20 years in adult education. But guess what, guys? It's a lot like engaging them online. Group work. Oh, yeah. It's really not that easy in distance learning when it's asynchronous. Incentives. Lots of ideas, right? So it's not that different except for the technology part. Engaging students is very similar. Look at all those ideas, Guy. I love the ideas. WhatsApp, calling, Google voice calls, Google Hangouts, building community, doing interaction, pictures, videos, games, remind, incentives, all of that, right? Okay. So the next slide, we're going to talk about students' needs. If you guys have ever heard of Maslow, he talks about the 4 needs that everybody needs, okay? And to learn, we talk about we need to meet these needs. Well, we've got physical and emotional safety, having a sense of belonging, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. A lot of times a student might have good self-esteem because they do good on their job and they do good in their family life, but they might not have good self-esteem about math. When it's about self-esteem about a particular subject, we call it self-efficacy. We might have students with great self-esteem, but when it comes to technology, they have low self-efficacy. So we've got to deal with that, right? So self-esteem and self-efficacy. And then the last one's called self-actualization. And in learning in school, that means they need to know they have learned, knowing what they've learned. If they don't feel that they're learning, they don't need to come, right? They've got to know. You might know they're learning, but they have to know. So you've been chatting already. Answer me. How can we help meet students' needs at a distance? I've already had a lot of people respond, but give you a little bit more time to respond to that. It sounds like we have a lot of communication going on. It's about communications, right? Oh, I love it. How-to videos. Grades. Grades are good for your advanced students. Zoom, Remind, Classroom, Community Games, Message, Call, Text, Ed Puzzle. That's a type of interactive, can be calling, emails, engaging topics. Using Course Sites is a learning management system. Remind, emails, having a convenient location. If you, one thing you can do with your distance learning students that we're not even talking about right now, but you have a virtual hub, but a lot of programs actually do a space where they can go once a week or twice a week or even every day to work on a computer lab. So they provide a physical space, even if the teacher's not there, they have a hub. So that's like a convenient location, and then they can meet. Relationship building. You guys already know all the best practices. I tell you, you know how to meet your students' needs at a distance, right? So let's go on. We're going to go through now our best practices for hybrid distance learning. Now I have practices at 2 levels, and we're going to go, it's programmatic and instructional. So let's talk about why I include programmatic. In the next slide, I have a diagram. And in this diagram, I say that the student engagement's a team effort, especially with our hybrid students. How do we engage them in the DL? I believe that probably we see, and I think Anne-Marie shared this with me, but I think it's true that we have a lot of students enrolled in distance learning curriculum who may not get very many hours on it. They're not engaging in it. They're not doing the distance learning curriculum. And sometimes there's really good reasons. I have to share something with you quickly. And Glenda Rose shared this with me in her program in Community Action. They had students who were doing really good on distance learning until the COVID-19. And then all of a sudden, they didn't do their distance learning anymore. And they were confused as staff. Why aren't they doing it? Well, they contacted students. Does anybody have an idea why they weren't doing distance learning anymore? It makes total sense, but I didn't think about it. Why did they stop doing distance learning when they got COVID-19 and they had to stay home? They were sick, life happens. How about most of them had kids at home and they only had one phone and their kids, or one Chromebook that the school gave them, or they're helping their kids with homework, right? They got 5 kids and they all are having to use a very limited resource. They just didn't have time. So, you know, there are reasons, valid reasons that people can't participate in DL. But a lot of times, honestly, it's because they're not encouraged to do it. And it's not just about the DL teacher. We're going to see that it's the whole team effort. It's the whole way you set up distance learning. The program director needs to be kind of the person who guides the team. So they're on here. You've got DL coordinators, but you need the instructional coordinators on board too that have nothing to do with DL. You need your traditional classroom support staff, teacher aide, and especially teachers. You need the traditional classroom teachers to be on board with supporting hybrid distance learning. Even if they don't know the curriculum and don't support them in the curriculum, there's ways they can encourage those students. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Okay, so there's 3 practices that I identified as programmatic level best practices. Ensure professional development for teachers who support students in a DL curriculum. I put here support because it could be that they have a distance learning teacher that has a class and they're supporting. But it also now could be a traditional classroom teacher who has students in the classroom that are engaged in a distance learning curriculum, which is almost always the case. We have very few pure distance learners that never go to class ever. They have to get 12 hours. We know that. Most of our students, you know, go to class at least half of the time. Provide distance, this is number 2, provide distance learning instructor led. In other words, the distance learning instructor leads a comprehensive orientation for each DL curriculum. Yes, this takes time and planning, but the research shows that the orientations are a good, strong, comprehensive orientation, one of the most effective ways to have distance learning work. This is not your regular program orientation. This is in addition to. They're already in your program. They're going to start distance learning. They have to become a student first before you put them in distance learning. They have to, you know, they have to go through assessment, things like that. So they're already, your regular program orientation is already done. This is a specialized distance learning and orientation. And then we need provide whole program support. Number 3, whole program support for our hybrid learners. We need the support of the traditional classroom teacher as well as the distance learning teacher to have the students encouraged to do the DL on their own, the distance learning on their own. We're going to go in a little bit more detail now. On number 1, Module 1 of the Distance Learning Academy requires all staff involved in distance education to take the online Module 1 training. It is in the PD portal. This goes over what is distance learning, gives all the definitions. It's very important that teachers who deal with distance learning take this, all staff. In addition to this, I do have to say that it's important for the teacher who's going to support a student in distance learning, if they're going to be the person helping and facilitating that curriculum, they need training in the curriculum. Now, TWC does not provide training in the curriculum. That's something you do either with the publisher or you do within your program. But that's very important, the professional development. I have a question for you now. Okay, so what about your program's PD for DL? Right now, how well does your program ensure professional development for all teachers who support, that means they facilitate students who are enrolled in a DL curriculum? The student is working on a DL curriculum. The teacher is helping them. Do they have a teacher? Is that teacher trained? I want you to type a 0, 1, 2, or 3. And if you got a 1, that's good because it means you can work on it. If you got a 3, that's great. You need to share with other people what you do. Okay?
We got a lot of variety here.
That's great. That's great. I'm glad the whole thing, I want you to reflect on this and see where you need to move to. Okay? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next one. You can continue to mark your answer, but we're moving on to the next program practice. The next one is the DL orientation. You see how I put something in italics? Orientations to DL curriculum allow DL teachers to begin fostering student and teacher connections and students interactions. That is the key time for a DL teacher, whoever's going to support that student, to meet with the students and give them the orientation. Now, if it's the traditional classroom teacher, they have their classroom there and it's all their students. Of course, they already have them there and they can do the orientation with their students. But just think about, I know a program that was setting some DL stuff up and they were planning to they had an orientation team that was separate from the instructional team. And they weren't planning on the instructors being at the orientation. And I just didn't think it was a good idea. It wasn't my call. I just said, hey, I think it's probably better if you could have the teacher come in for a while. Even if it's virtually, right? But they need to see their teacher and get to know their teacher. It's their teacher, right? So at the orientation, the DL teacher should introduce students to and have hands-on practice. It's not telling them, it's having them do it. And that means on their phones. You see I have a picture of the phone. Most of them use cell phones for a lot of things. If the curriculum can be done on a phone, smartphone, have them use it. If not, the laptop, Chromebook, computer, whatever. How are you going to communicate with the student? And that includes if you're going to put them on Remind, how to use it, or WhatsApp. How are you going to communicate? Email? Are you going to use an email list? Okay. We have to be careful because you got everyone's email. So you probably shouldn't you have to use something like Mighty Text. Mighty Text is a email listserv that you could use that you don't see everyone's individual emails. Any virtual hub. When I say virtual hub, it could be a learning management system. Some people use Google Classroom. Some people use, Blackboard. I saw someone using Canvas. You could use Schoology, Edmodo, or some of you could even use something like Flipgrid. It's not made to be a learning management system, but it can be. Wakelet, Ashley Winkle uses it as a virtual hub for her students. Okay, I know that because I've seen it. So you can use any kind of interactive resource that allows you to communicate to students that every student can get onto as your learning management system, as your virtual hub, okay? You need to also use an interactive online tool. Let's say you're using Blackboard or Canvas. Those are just learning management system. You also need to make sure you're using the interactive tools such as the discussion group that they have. Blackboard has Blackboard Collaborate, which does the live online conferencing. But a lot of the time you'll want to use an outside tool. If you're using Schoology, for example, or Edmodo, maybe instead of a discussion group, you might want to set up students to do what's called a Padlet. That's one of the resources I love a lot. You could have students collaboratively work on a Flipgrid. You could have students there's something also called VoiceThread. And I'll show you on the resources, I point out 5 that you may not have heard of that you might want to go and look at of these virtual interactive tools. And then of course the distance learning curriculum, they need to know how to log into it. Get to the browser, username and password, and proceed through and navigate and see their progress on the curriculum. So that's a lot, right? On the next slide, there is something that I've kind of done, a modification of this, but it worked pretty well. Consider incorporating in your deal orientation a simulation where students work on the curriculum independently, like the teacher's with the students, gone through everything. But at the end, before the end of the orientation, the teacher says, okay, everybody, you're gonna work on your own now. I'm going to be in the next room, but pretend like I'm far away. I have a little step-by-step if you want to click on that link. This will be in your resource sheet, so you could go back and look at the instructions. Just to show you, one of the things I talked about, now if you've gone through your DL training, you know what double dipping means. You can show them how to use the curriculum, but you really don't want to be face-to-face while they're working on their distance learning curriculum, because that's not allowed. So part of the instructions, the first thing, they have to sign out of their curriculum that they're practicing on. They have to sign out. Look at step 2. They need to sign out of their orientation, because you're going to be leaving the room and they're going to be working on curriculum. They're going to be doing distance learning hours now. So I told you the instructions you can give them, and their job is to log on to their curriculum, just like they were at home, and to work on it. And then to have a question and to use the contact procedure that you want them to use, whether it's Remind or email or WhatsApp, to contact you with the question while you're in the other room. Now, one of the things about this, they may ask you, can we help each other? Yes, they can help each other, because guess what? You're starting learner interaction. But say, yes, you need to help each other, but I want you to get each other's names. So when so in contact, if you want to share your contact information, like your emails, that would be great. So you can help each other when you're doing your work online. So you want to start, it's a great way also to encourage learner interaction to do this simulation activity. So I'm going to leave, I don't have time to go over the whole thing, but the resource is there if you decide to do something like that. And you can always modify this. This is just something that I did that's something very similar to this, okay?
And I want to remind everybody, as Denise said, remember the highway example with the green arrow. All of these resources that Denise is sharing with us today are going to be in a resource sheet that she developed. It's incredible, and I'll be posting it in the AEL community of practice, AEL instruction community of practice for everybody after today's session. Okay, so
Okay. So this is a poll. So Anne-Marie's going to bring up another poll. These responses on this one are anonymous. Okay, so you don't have to tell people if you're not doing a good job or not. Do you do an excellent job? Do you do a good job, a fair job, or do you need to work on it? So let's put your honest answers. Nobody knows who you are on this one. It's hard to say you do something bad, right? You're like, oh, they're going to say I'm doing bad at my program. But I think most people, orientation, sometimes they come up really, oh, we need to do this now. And we don't have time to really develop it in depth. Take some time. If you have any downtime in the summer, sometimes programs have a little downtime, different times of the year. Develop something that's going to work. And then when you pull it out, you're ready to go. Okay. And Ashley wrote, she's overwhelmed. Yep. I agree with that. And one of the things that has come up is on an orientation. And I'll be honest, it is hard for students. What you might be able to do now that everyone knows how to do this virtual stuff so much better, a lot of our students are going to be more ready for distance learning in the fall, because they know they're more comfortable with technology. You might try doing some of it in person, but you might try doing some of it virtually. So you don't have to come in twice. Or you might try to type what our teacher did. Our distance learning teacher did it in the classrooms, the traditional classroom. She went out to the traditional classroom and basically did the class. They got a lab, or she brought laptops or whatever. So in that case, you're meeting the students where they are. And then if she needs, the teacher can do some, or you could break it down, and it just depends on your situation, Ashley. When you're rural, it's a lot harder because you've got to move so much around places. So you got to think about it. Okay. So a lot of people want to work on it. That's fantastic. Get to work. Okay. With all your other stuff. No, just keep this in mind. You really want to do a good orientation. Research does show that it helps with student engagement online. Okay. Ooh, Tiffany. So she goes in person, but she also has a recorded video of her because she has rural sites to do the DL orientation. The hard part is getting them on the curriculum, obviously, hands-on, but yeah. Okay, now one of the things I want to talk about is that, okay, hybrid learners typically are going to have a stronger connection to a TC teacher. That stands for traditional what? Traditional classroom. Traditional classroom teachers, they see them more often. They see them in person. So they feel more connected. They have more trust in that person, right? That person is the person they're going to listen to, typically, okay? So you really need the collaboration between your distance learning teachers and your traditional classroom teachers. If they're different teachers for this student, they need to have some collaboration. And the traditional classroom teachers need to encourage and recognize the efforts and achievements of their hybrid students, regardless of what DL curriculum those students are in, regardless if the teacher knows anything about the curriculum. They need to incorporate it into their instruction, the recognition and encouragement of those students, okay? We have some strategies, okay? On these strategies, one of the things, I don't know if you do this right now, we need the face-to-face traditional classroom teacher, right? They need to know what's going on. How do they know how their student's progressing if they're not the same as if they don't help the student in distance learning? So they need information on what the student is doing. How can they get that information? Is it going to become the distance learning? How often does the distance learning teacher or the facilitator get reports and send it for Teams data entry? If it's every 2 weeks, maybe instead of weekly, every 2 weeks, that can also get sent, or there's a way for the traditional classroom teacher to know what the students are working on and if they're working on it or not. So they know who to encourage and who to recognize, okay? So you need to start something like that. And I'll be honest, we didn't do a good job when I had distance learning. I found out only classes where we had really good response on the distance learning were 2 classes, and I know this because we were a small program and I just talked to the teachers. The teachers encouraged the students every class to work on their distance learning curriculum, and they did. But the teachers that didn't encourage it, the students didn't work on it. So it's even the distance learning teacher would contact them and try to get with them. It's not the teacher they knew. They didn't have a relationship with the distance learning teacher, the same kind that they had with the traditional classroom teacher. The other one, the traditional classroom teacher needs to follow through with requests. I will tell you that some of my teachers that I used to supervise would not respond to the requests from the distance learning teacher to go visit their classrooms. We can be very territorial as teachers sometimes. I personally am not, but I've seen it and I understand it, but it's not good for the student. You need to remind them, the student needs us to support them as a team. The distance learning teacher needs to have time to come to your classroom, share information. The teacher needs to visit the classroom, and it can be a virtual visit using Skype or using some other method, but they need to be there to talk to the students as well. The 2 teachers together can have certificates of achievement that the distance learning teacher sends to be given out by the physical teacher right there to the students. They need to see that it's important and that their traditional teachers care as well as their distance learning teacher. So I have 2 boxes here, as you can see this. I want you to think about both. Now, what you put is not the important thing. It's what you think before you put an answer that I really care about. I want you to only look at the green. Do you see the already do? The already do. So the question is, what are you already doing as a distance learning teacher or your teachers in your programs? What do? Are they already doing number 1? Are they already doing number 2? Are they already doing number 3? Are they doing all 3? So write down a 1, a 2, a 3, a 1, 2, a 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3. What are you already doing? And a 0 is fine. Not doing any of them, that's fine. Or not applicable. Okay. Did you guys all think about what you're doing now? Okay. What are you doing now? Now think about this and what could you do? This is something I think that programs are not doing enough of, and this is going to make a huge difference in your DL students' efforts online, is this type of cooperation right here. Okay, let me just tell you, there's different things in the class. If you're a classroom teacher out there, I want you to start asking your learners to update what they're doing. I want you to tell them, hey, who's working on their DL curriculum? What did you do this week? Oh, why don't you take out your phone and show it? Or you want to come up here? Let's show it on the board what you're working on. How many units did you do? That's excellent, everybody. Give them an applause. Make it a part of your class. It can take 3 to 5 minutes once a week, but it's important. And the next thing, I don't have time to go to this right now. I made a spreadsheet for you. I like to do this. You know when you graph a chart and it can go up and up as you get better? It's a physical reminder. I have a chart that I made that you can download and use if you'd like. It's an Excel chart where as you enter, you ask the students, okay, this week we got 15 hours. Last week we got 18. So on the chart, it'll automatically chart it on a graph. If you're in a physical classroom, it's better to let the students do it so they learn how to graph, right? But if not, I have a chart you can download. So think about, are you guys doing this? Are the traditional classroom teachers doing this? And how can you get program directors? How can you get them to do this? You don't want to force it because sometimes that's resisted. But how can you encourage them to get this done and see how important it is for your learners? Okay? Because I do want to talk about instructional best practices. There are no surprises, guys. Teacher to student relationships, student to student interaction, that is probably the hardest part of traditional distance learning because everyone's using a different curriculum on their own. So you have to have something that does that where students might not get proxy hours, but they'll persist and they'll keep doing their distance learning curriculum. And finally, there's something called fostering your teacher online presence. The research has shown because the distance learner, the reason the students don't trust the teacher, don't know the teacher, is they don't see enough of the teacher. The teacher has to be online a lot with the students. Okay, here's some strategies for teacher to teacher. Now, all of these a lot of you already said you have little welcome videos. This link, when you go to your resource sheet, goes to an excellent little article about what you should have in that video and what you shouldn't have. It's super. You need to know your students, your DL students. If you don't know these students, how can you teach them? One of the things that I like is using Google Forms to collect information. There's other ways I put down there. I have a link there to a tutorial for Google Forms. If you don't know how to do Google Forms, you need to go to that tutorial and use it now. There's not one person who serves in any capacity that could not use this. This is a really good tool to use for anything. Number 3, super important, empathy and encouragement when you communicate. Empathy and encouragement in all communications. You have to be careful with written communication. You don't want it to be too sugary or sweet because it can be seen as inappropriate. But you also don't want to seem cold in any way. So be careful with that. When you're in person, virtually even, face-to-face where they see you, they probably can see more of the empathy and encouragement. You're going to have maybe announcement little videos for your students that you could send every week. Anytime they can see video of you, it's better. They have to be short, less than a minute, but little short videos. Real-time communication. Do you see that? Skype, WhatsApp, Google Meet, WebEx, Zoom. You need to have some times where they can meet. They may not come, but you need to have that. And then you need to respond as soon as possible to student questions. Maybe you tell them you'll respond in 24 hours, but maybe you see that they've texted you, right? And you can't get to them then. Just respond and say, hey, I saw your message. I'll get back with you later. That way they know you care and you're there, that you're there for them. They're not in some void. Okay? Learner interactions. I love this online icebreaker. If you go to this link, you have to scroll down. You'll see 3 little icons that will tell you links to online icebreaker ideas and great questions for online discussions, okay? Now, I also want to talk about netiquette. This is a link right here. It's wrong, but we'll post the correct one for you on the research sheet. I'll make sure. It goes to a lesson on netiquette. That's super important for everyone. And then you need to participate. You need to be a role model for your students, and you need to participate so they learn about you. There's 3 more strategies here that just give you ideas. You don't have to do all of these, but the most important one for me is number 4. You need to have some kind of tool that allows communication with your students. communication that's direct. When you go to that link, it talks about tools like Padlet, Flipgrid. I have Wakelet on there. I have Yo Thread, which is like Yo Teach, which is a chatting for your private chat. I give lots of ideas and some research and some resources for a lot of online tools. And you need activities for discussion. And if you go to the link on discussion, it tells you some really good activities to do for learner interaction with discussions.
This resource sheet that Denise created is incredible.
So I just want to say I have 9 strategies for fostering your teacher online presence. A lot of them link back to the first 2. Okay, a lot of them have to do with be there for your students. The students need to see you. You need to give them individualized progress. You're going to have a quiz over this. I'll give you a hint. What if you sent out a text message to all students weekly? Keep doing the great work. That's not effective, right? That's not individualized, and you don't even know if they're working. So, and again, I give that link right there talks about the virtual hubs that you guys, some of you have talked about, you're already using, okay? I just want to glance on a couple. You need to keep them updated. You need to have weekly announcements, even if it's just an update on how you're doing and how they're doing. If it's not, they need to, presence means a lot of stuff from you, a lot of communications with you, a lot of visibility, but it needs to be meaningful. Videos are fantastic. Duplicate forms of communication. Dr. Rose, Glenda Rose always talks about this. Always use 2 ways. You could use Remind and WhatsApp, but you could use email as well as a system like Blackboard. They have those systems inside that can use it, but you need to have an email. A lot of times I like to have a text communication with my adult learners, especially my ESL, because they don't use email much. You want to get them to use email, but you want them to get the information. So make sure you have communications there with them. And there's a really good communication plan. It tells you to scroll down, but the whole thing is really good to read on that link. So I want to talk really, the virtual face-to-face hours make sense, but I want to say that the number 8, you need learner reflections. Quizzes, just having quizzes that they take online, that has not been shown to help them engage. What helps them engage is when they really meaningfully reflect on their learning. We know that from adult learning theory. Okay, these are 4 takeaways. The one thing I put in italics, what is it? The importance of who? The traditional classroom teachers. If you're still with us, put TC. Traditional classroom teacher. I think that's the missing link in a lot of what we're doing in supporting our distance learning students.
This resource, all of the resources that Denise shared will be available in the Adult Education and Literacy Instruction Community of Practice in the PD portal. And then there's a folder, so you'll be able to find it in a topic folder in the community of practice. So, and I just want to say thank you again for everyone who has participated.
Thank you, everyone.